Welcome everyone. Good afternoon, good morning for those that are joining us from West, and good evening for those that are joining us from the East. So I think we've quite a lot of people on the call, which is great to see certainly from all parts of the world. Today is our first innovation pillar session that we ran in 2021. And some of you that have worked with us for a while will know that we've ran these sessions in person in a previous world, but today is stage one. The purpose of these sessions is really, it's about looking at how do we create an innovation roadmap and a mechanism for organizations to find ways to collect ideas within their businesses, but more importantly, how they action, evaluate, and measure the impact of them. Today's session is the sort of first part of that, which is really around how do you set and achieve your innovation goals. So sort of starting with the end in mind, we'll work backwards. So this is one of 6. So hopefully if you enjoyed today, there are 5 more to follow as we take you through that process. Just a little bit about me. I'm Jonny Fisher. I'm one of the co-founders and CRO of IdeaDrop. We're an ideation innovation management platform. My role primarily is to work with our clients and really help them understand what their innovation goals are as a primary starter, but then equally about how do they develop and create programs that help facilitate that journey. For those that don't know who we are and what we are as an organization, IdeaDrop is a technology platform, a SaaS-based system with mobile applications as well. It allows you to capture, curate, and action the best ideas from people within your organization or from, of course, across your wider ecosystem. So we allow you to create an innovation network effectively and then manage the ideas within that network through tech. Today's sessions and subsequent sessions aren't about technology. They're very much more around the programs, the people and the process that exist, and how you create an innovation program, not an innovation tool. The tool is the facilitation. It's the central piece that allows and connects everything together. So, of course, if you're interested in the technology, please do let us know, and we can have conversations with you more specifically about that. But today is very much around process. So just to give you an idea of the agenda, I'm going to do some opening remarks. We probably won't take me 5 minutes, so please be here. Before I pass over to Paul Sloane, our very generous keynote speaker, who's going to talk about innovation goals. I'll let Paul introduce himself fully, but he's an expert in the field and has many credentials to his name, as well as being a published author, so much more knowledgeable in the space than me, and hence why Paul's here. And then we're going to break into an exercise. And the purpose of the exercise is really just to showcase the types of questions and sort of theories that you want to put forward when helping to define those innovation goals. So it's to give you a structure, and it's also to introduce you to other people that are doing similar things in different organizations. We're going to talk quite generally about the types of questions that you want to ask yourself, but we'll of course be able to follow up in more depth. So each organization, of course, will be unique in that own instance. So today is really about giving you some of the tooling and methodologies that you might want to use to help to do that. So we're going to run that session, and then we're going to sort of just tail it off with a quick sort of summary and an open discussion. But the bulk of the session is that workshop, and then we'll do a quick Q&A and let everyone go. If you have any questions throughout the session, particularly the presentation session, please just put them in the chat, and myself or one of the IdeaDrop colleagues, or indeed if it's Paul, will be able to get back to you and answer those, or we'll follow up post the session. So what should you get from today, and what's the sort of purpose? So if you're writing in a book, these are 3 things, and we're going to send you this deck and these recordings, but setting innovation goals based on top level business objectives. Why is that important? I think it's looking at understanding what it is you're trying to achieve before you start, and then actually how do the innovation goals help deliver that. So innovation is it's a bit of a dreadful word in a way, because it just means about doing something better or creating a new idea or a new process. The purpose of innovation isn't to innovate, it's to deliver against something. So what we really want to understand from an organizational perspective is what it is you're trying to deliver, and then the innovation goals will fit under that. So these are the things that we need to do in order to achieve that goal. But the business goal is the important bit, not the innovation that makes it, because otherwise we get it the wrong way around. Taking these goals and putting them into innovation challenges. So this is just around how you kind of work backwards again. So we know what the top level business objective is. How do we translate these into questions or problem statements or challenges that we can broadcast across our organization, our communities, and have the ability to actually collect ideas that help us to align to that goal? So asking the right questions, getting ideas around projects or business priorities that we're trying to solve, It's quite a skill, but doing that right will allow you to manage the innovation that will create a flow for the innovation that you get. And then creating and implementing challenge campaigns. So again, that's a subsect of that, which is how do we actually go away and do it? What are the sort of key actionable items that we need to do in order to achieve that sort of top level point? So there are many things that make up successful innovation. We've picked 6, so there are many different ways in which you can look at this, and many different sort of authors and theories and models that surround innovation. We kind of break it down into 6 because we see them in our experience working with organizations as the most important. I've already talked a little bit about the strategic goals, which is really understanding what it is you're trying to achieve. The committed leadership aspect is of course, is the leadership of the organization committed to those actual goals? And whilst that sounds really simple, and you'd be quite surprised that lots of organizations talk about innovation at a very strategic level and how important it is and why they want to do it, but there is a disconnect between what they say and what they do. And the successful innovation programs that we see connect the top to the bottom and the bottom to the top. So the leadership actually fulfill, rather than just something that's in an annual report or something that they can say as a strategic pillar of their organization. It's about, are the leadership committed to actually doing something about it, because they need to provide the time and the resource and the energy in order to have that to happen. That in turn, as you will probably see on the right, empowers culture. And culture is, change management and culture are traditionally and continue to be complex areas of every business. We know that takes time and it takes repetition and it takes that committed leadership. So if you want to create an innovation culture, a culture of innovation, this is about the leadership team saying this is what we want to do and why we want to do and how we're going to do it. When you have that sort of commitment and you understand what you're trying to achieve, then putting in clear processes. So actually, what's the methodology and the mechanism? And that's what we're talking about today, but equally what tooling and technology helps you to do. Inspiring communication. So why should people get involved? And I think that very often is missed. So organizations talk about innovation and strategic goals and why it's important and how we want to be innovative and what it means to us as a business. But we really need to understand, what does it mean to the staff that work in our organizations, or our customers or our consumers or our partners? What's in it for them, and why should they be involved? And it's not, without being too altruistic, it's not about, well, it's not necessarily just about money or reward, but it's about their participation and the greater good of creating something. And that's kind of in the inspirational communication that's really important. And then the final part is the positive impact. So none of it is worthwhile unless we find an impact. We can collect, I often say ideas are like vanity metrics. You know, if you collect 10 ideas, 100 ideas, 1,000, 10,000, it doesn't really matter. If we don't measure the impact of those ideas and understand the impact they've had on our organization and how they've helped to affect that strategy that we've set or those business goals that we're trying to achieve, then it is just an exercise. And it's an exercise that will die very quickly, because if people can't see how these things connect, they'll very quickly go, well, what's the point? And they're right to, because if we don't know what the point is, then we're asking the wrong questions in the first place, because we're never going to do anything with the answers. So really, really important that we measure and share that impact. Slightly scary diagram. I'm not going to talk through this. You'll all be pleased to know. This is actually an impact plan that isn't just around launching an ideation platform or an ideation program. This is the sort of end-to-end process that you go through as an organization. And it's a continuous process. So part of it is around sort of setup and launch. The secondary part is about how do you create business as usual and culture. Our pillars or our innovation programs are based around these innovation impact plans. But today, we're just talking about the critical success factors, and our subsequent programs will look at different aspects of this plan and what are the key pillars of obviously driving successful innovation. So that's it for a intro. I am going to pass over to Paul Sloane, who I'm sure will give himself a good introduction. Thank you very much, Paul, for agreeing to join us today. And Paul has participated in some of our events that have been very well received. So looking forward to the talk, Paul, and over to you.
Well, thank you, Jonny, and good afternoon, innovators. I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to speak to you. I'll try and share my screen if I can. And here we go, setting goals for innovation. Let's do this. Okay, so what I'm going to do this afternoon is I'm going to challenge your thinking, really. I'm going to give you some things to think about, really, rather than tell you exactly how to do this. and I want to provoke you and stimulate your thinking, really. And I'd like to start with one of my favorite quotes on innovation from Peter Drucker, the great management guru. And he said this: every organization must prepare for the abandonment of everything it does. He didn't say you have to change a bit, you have to improve, you have to be more competitive. He says you have to be prepared to throw away everything you do and start again. And that's kind of really serious. And we've seen companies do this and pivot in COVID through remarkable changes because of the necessity to do this in the current climate. So I want to very briefly cover 3 topics in my short presentation because they are related. I wanted to say a word about vision, though that's a separate topic in itself. I want to say a word about goals, and I want to say a word about metrics, and put the 3 into context, because I think it's helpful to think of these 3 topics together. And let's start with the vision. Innovation starts with a vision. There's a purpose to innovation. You don't innovate for the sake of innovating. You can, but generally speaking, you innovate to achieve the goal. And the goal is something that people have to believe in. It has to be something worthwhile. And you need to have a vision which inspires the people and which tells them why you need to innovate. Why do we need to change? Why do we need to throw out stuff that's been successful and replace it with new stuff? Because we need to get to a new place. So the innovative leader says, we've done very well, we've got to where we are today, but where I want us to be in 12 months' time or 2 years' time is somewhere different. And we're going to have to innovate to get there. We're going to have to be smarter, and I need your help to do that. And I believe that when it comes to a vision, that you need an ABC vision. The vision that you set for your business should be appealing, believable, and challenging. It should be all those 3 things. It should be something which appeals to people, motivates them, inspires them, something they believe is possible, but something which is going to stretch them. And that's the trick, is to get all those 3 in there. And it shouldn't just be a set of platitudes about outstanding customer service and top quartile in performance or profit. Here's the most famous vision statement, which John F. Kennedy set in 1962. Before this decade is out, we will send a man to the moon and return him safely to Earth. And when he set this goal, nobody knew how to do it. They'd hardly put any rockets in space. The Russians were well ahead of them. The tools they had were very rudimentary. The computing power they had was elementary. And what he did was he assembled a group of very bright people, and he gave them a lot of resources, and he said, you figure it out. And they did. And this is the approach to innovation that I like, is set a challenge for really bright people and ask them to figure out how to get there. Don't be prescriptive about the route. So the conventional approach to setting goals for innovation looks a little like this. You start with your business strategy. And I've worked for many American companies and British companies, and we always had a business strategy with a lot of spreadsheets and numbers and growth figures. And from that, you'd get business goals. And the goals are, we want to grow the revenue by 10% a year. We want to break into the German market. We want to attract a different kind of customer, whatever it is. And certain parts of the goals you know how to do. The parts you don't know tend to fall into the innovation goals. So the bits that we know how to execute, we're going to carry on doing that. And the other areas, well, here are some areas where we need innovation. They tend to be the gaps. And so you end up with something that looks a little like this. Our innovation goals are, we need new products or services because we've got a gap in revenue. We want something that will generate new revenues. Our marketing isn't working very well, so we need new marketing methods, and we need to speed up production. So how are we going to do this? Well, new products, we're going to go to the research and development department and tell them to get a move on. New marketing methods, well, we'll hire a new advertising and PR agency. They've got lots of ideas as to how we can spend our money. And then we've got some consultants in who'll tell us about robotics or something else. And this is a conventional approach to innovation, where you use innovation to fill in the gaps. And this is not, you might not be surprised to hear, this is not my recommended approach. This is what I would call a very tightly defined approach to innovation, where you tightly define the parts that the way you need innovation to plug the gaps. And I would recommend that you consider what I would call a ubiquitous approach to innovation, where instead of saying here are the gaps that we need to fill with innovation, you say we need to innovate in every department. And it's written into the objectives and KPIs of every department head. And it's in everyone's objectives. Even someone who's a bookkeeper who you don't want to innovate with bookkeeping, you still want their ideas. And if you've got a system like Idea Drop for idea management, you want everyone to be inputting ideas for how the whole business can improve. And to do that, you've got to throw down a challenge, and people have to believe in what Jonny was calling the positive impact, that if they make suggestions, those suggestions will be listened to, evaluated and acted on. And this is another way of putting it. If you're the leader, you should show the destination. Here's where we want to end up. But you should let people, as far as possible, choose the route. You should empower them to find their own way there, to come up with solutions to the problems that they face, rather than being prescriptive and saying, we've done it this way, I want you to carry on doing it this way. Tell everyone their job is to find new and better ways to do things. So innovation should be everywhere, and it should be in everyone's objectives, rather than being limited to a handful of goals. I'll mention a cautionary tale. I mean, Microsoft, a highly innovative company, and Bill Gates is a very admired and innovative leader. But in the 1990s, the early 1990s, a team in Microsoft developed an ebook reader, a piece of hardware, and they took it to Bill Gates and the senior team, and they said, look at this prototype, this is a really cool idea. And Bill Gates turned it down. He said it doesn't fit with our corporate strategy, it doesn't fit with our business strategy, our goals. We're totally focused on Windows and developing Windows and things that are aligned with Windows. This doesn't fit. And he turned it down. And Amazon went on to develop the Kindle, and Microsoft missed out on the whole ebook opportunity because they were too focused on their business strategy and business goals. And if you look for certainty and fit in innovation, it has to fit strictly within this our assumptions about what the business should look like. You are in danger of missing out on opportunities, as Microsoft did. So I just wanted to say those words about setting goals. Don't be too tight. You have to set goals, but empower people as far as possible. I'll just say a word about metrics, because this is related. How can we measure innovation is a question I often get. And this is a whole presentation in itself, which I'm going to shorten to just a couple of minutes. I believe when you're setting goals for innovation, you should look in three areas: the input metrics, process metrics, and output metrics. What are we putting in to the innovation pipeline? What are we have we got inside the innovation pipeline, and what's coming out at the far end? And very briefly, input metrics include the number of ideas generated. I know it's not a perfect measure, but it is a kind of measure of how many people are involved and how much activity there is. And you should also measure your resources allocated to innovation. How many people and what sort of budget have you got allocated? And I recommend you have a budget for innovation, and most of that budget will be wasted on things that don't work. If the only things you try work, you're not being bold enough. Process metrics, a really good metric is the average time from initial idea approval to implementation. How long is that in your organization? And you should strive to shorten that period. The number of ideas approved and the number implemented, stage gate pass rates at each stage, and the value of the innovation pipeline. I know it's an estimate, I know it's guesswork, but it's still a guess that's worth doing. And very briefly, output metrics, a number of new products or services launched, revenue from new products or services. A lot of companies use this. What revenues have we had from products launched in the last 2 years, which is a good metric, but it's backward looking. It doesn't tell you what you're doing for the future. The return on investment on innovation spend. Market perception is really important. Are we seen as cool? Are we seen as innovative? Are we seen as doing interesting things? Or are we seen as a follower? And the number of new customers. Innovation should attract new customers. It's another. So there's no perfect set of metrics, and you have to choose the ones that suit you and suit your objectives. So really, those are the three topics. You need to set a vision for where you're headed. From that vision, you can extract conventional goals, and they are useful. But I would put them, don't be too tight in aligning your innovation goals strictly with your business strategy. The business strategy is going to be wrong. You're going to end up doing something different. So you have to be fairly relaxed about and open-minded about innovations that pop up along the way, even if they don't perfectly fit. So rather than being totally prescriptive about where to innovate, be broad-minded and ask everyone to innovate. And then set some general metrics that you know how well you're doing, because many companies set off with a blaze of glory. We're going to have a big innovation program, and then it fades because it's not in the KPIs, it's not in the measures, it's not in the department heads' objectives, and they slip back to business as usual, working flat out to deliver this quarter's numbers. And innovation is different from that. Innovation involves risk. It involves spending time and money on things that might not work. So that's my presentation, very brief. I'm Paul Sloane. I'm an author and speaker and consultant. I blog a lot on these topics. Please link with me on LinkedIn or follow me on Twitter. I'm at Paul Sloane on Twitter. And at this stage, I'd like to hand back to Jonny.
Thank you very much, Paul. That's, as always, insightful. And I think there's a couple of things actually I wanted to pick out that kind of resonated, and I hadn't seen the presentation ahead of time, but I love the Bill Gates example, particularly where you talk about a great idea, but not for us now. And I think that happens a lot. I think it's difficult, and it's difficult for organisations to deal with it. And the one way around it, it's without finding out cop-out, is having what we see work quite well is having a great idea bucket. Because you will have many great ideas that you can't do something with, and maybe Bill Gates' reader was one of them he should have done something with, and retrospectively it probably was. But don't be afraid to go, there are things that we can't do today, but we could do tomorrow, and we don't want to lose that. So when you get great ideas, you need to find a way to keep them and to store them and to manage them, because they will and could be very relevant in the future. But it is difficult for leaders sometimes to look past beyond what they're being targeted on. I love the idea about not being too bold. If everything works, then you're not being bold enough, and I think that's true. You're giving people, I guess, an area or a playground or a safe place where they can fail, and to an extent, celebrating that failure. I know it's not very odd, but truly innovative companies will stand up and go, "We tried something and it didn't work, but we learned something from that." Because it's a bit like if you're digressing slightly. My daughter's learning to walk at the minute. If she didn't fall over, she wouldn't learn how to walk and know what it was to walk or how to do it. So we have to fall over, and that's harder. It's easier said than done. So one recommendation I've seen in the past is giving people a safe place. And like Paul said, a bookkeeper doesn't want mistakes, a lawyer doesn't want to make mistakes, but you have to find an area where they can be expressive and try things different in a safer place. So it's a way to get around it. And then finally, being open-minded. I think that's the key thing. And I loved your analogy of the mountain and climbing the mountain, allowing people to find the way up the mountain. So rather than being prescriptive, or having different paths up that mountain is another way to look at it.
Yes.
You could have different goals for different journeys up that mountain. We don't know, to Paul's point, which is the right one and which is the wrong one. We know the outcome is right, but there are many ways to go. So it's another way of visually representing it. But, thank you, Paul. Really enjoyed that. Actually, it's stimulated. Sorry, I could talk for Britain. Stimulates lots of thoughts in my mind about where we could go. But I will stick to the presentation. Otherwise, I'll get in trouble. Excellent. Kind of repeating something Paul said, so I'm going to do this quite quickly. Every great strategic innovation begins with setting goals. Coincidentally, I mean, it's a statement that could be challenged because great innovations happen when we least expect them as well. But within a corporate organization and landscape, I think having the structure is important. We want to give people an area of freedom in which they can express themselves. But it's about how do you make it manageable for your business. And sometimes if we're too open and altruistic, let's just see what happens, and what we can come up with, it scares organizations because they can't control it. So I think my advice is to put a structure and a process in place, but allow a level of that inspirational thought is also important. So that takes me to the workshops. So I think hopefully we're on time. We are going to be split up into groups, I think 3 groups. There's going to be a couple of idea drop facilitators in each group. they're going to take you through a exercise. That exercise is related to what is my innovation goal, and Paul's already very eloquently described start at the end. We know what the outcome is that we're trying to achieve as an organization, but what are the steps that we need to take in order to get there? He also rightly said that the steps will change, and I think that's okay as well. And I know there are some clients at the call as well that I say this to all the time. It's not just a cop out. It's not because we don't know how to get there. It's just we do know that this will evolve and change over time, and we should be prepared to have a level of flexibility that sits around it. So here's just some examples, some top level organizational goals that might exist. So these are the types of things that get written into strategy documents that Paul described, the types of things that go, how do we improve the business? So, employee retention, keep more people. How do we increase our profit? How do we make sustainability a core value? Increase market share, increase revenue. These are all things that we'll hear, and they're very relevant. And they're very relevant because this is, if you're a private, it doesn't matter if you're a private organization or a public organization, you have sort of shareholders and boards and various things. The success of the business is typically deemed by these types of metrics. So these are the things that we want to be able to show success against. The more we can link to what those big business metrics or goals are or performance indicators, the more likely we'll get budget, time, and resource in order to allocate it. It doesn't account for the things that we don't know, but at least allows us to structure. One thing I would say before we jump into the exercise is think about what this actually means. So increase employee retention by 10%, lovely metric, but why? I mean, well, obviously, if 10% of people don't leave the business, then this is a good thing. But why is that more important? Well, it costs us X amount of £1,000 to hire someone. The lost productivity that arises from that, understanding how long, what that true gap is, how that impacts other people within the organization. So thinking about the real pain points that some of these that exist, but actually then why it matters, and we should always have that why statement without going into sort of a Simon Sinek mode. But if we can get that bit right, then at least we know we've got the right, we're doing it for the right reasons. So challenge definition, make it clear, manageable, achievable, and specific to your strategic goals. So again, slightly against the grain a little bit here, but again, we're trying to give practical rather than just sort of holistic or altruistic views. So how do we actually get something that we can measure? So again, that's how the business will invest. The business is our master. We need to be able to say we do these things and we get these outcomes. So therefore we continue to spend money or be creative or use technology or tools or get people and processes to do these things. Because if we can't show those results, then we're just talking. And if we can't show where the benefit to the business is, they won't invest. And that's where I think innovation often fails, because people go, we can't put a number against it. So therefore, how does it hit the KPIs that the business is set? So how do we get there? Lots of different ways in which we innovate. And again, innovate, dreadful word. It just means about doing something differently or ideally doing something better. But types of things that will hopefully impact your business are optimization of process, increasing efficiency, improving or developing new products or services, acquisition models, embedding new technologies, obviously improve the efficiency of your business. Lots of different ways in which we can be innovative. And there's lots of research, not today's session, out there around how innovative companies or companies that score high on an innovation score have better processes, better efficiencies, are more profitable. There's a big diversity and inclusion piece around innovation, but again, not for today's session, but there's lots of research and data out there, and hopefully why everyone's on this call is that innovation has a big and positive impact on the business and the people that work in that business. So I think this is where we're going to split up and jump into our groups, but this is the form that we're going to look at. So just some really, really simple questions. The facilitators in the Idea Drop group will take you through specific business goals that we've predefined. But equally, we do have the ability to go in and do these for any goal. And it's just about creating a process and a mechanism for how do you come up with those statements in the first place. And then we'll have a bit of an exercise. Depending on how we get on with time, we'll have a bit of a communication and conversation around some of the key themes that have come out from each group. So please, if you're happy to, please let your Idea Drop moderator know that you're quite happy to speak, or they might pick on you anyway, but it'd be really good to get sort of a narrative from each group at the end as to what worked well and what didn't. You might go, this is a little rubbish, and how is this going to work? I mean, we need to be open to those challenges, and we need to be open to understanding how this is applied. Otherwise, it is, again, just words. So I think that's us. Anastasia, will break us into groups. I think everyone will get a notification, and I think we've got 15, possibly 20 minutes to run this exercise, and then we'll spend sort of 10 minutes, 15 minutes narrating the outcomes, and then we'll wrap up. Welcome back. Hopefully everyone enjoyed the conversation. I think what we probably realized is that 20 minutes isn't enough time to solve the world's problems. We made a decent stab at ours. Hopefully, I'm not sure we've cracked the work home life balance as yet, and in the office or out of the office. But I think part of it was really around how do we ask the right questions and generate the right thought. And I think a big part and purpose of these sessions is much deeper than that. It's about connecting people, and I think that's what we want to do as an organization, not just as a technology, but it's pull people together. And of course that's open and optional, so if people are happy and open and want to be connected to different people on this call, then we can facilitate those conversations, because I think that's where we're going to get the ideas, and that's what sharing is about. And I'll touch upon that a little bit more in the sort of final parts of my presentation, but we're really interested in trying to create and ask some of these bigger questions from the people on this call, but our customers, our friends, our colleagues, networks, to try and get some answers and then share them, so we can collectively sort of look at this more holistically. So let me share my screen again. Perfect. So what we're going to do, we're not going to go through all of these, but we do have sort of 15 minutes left just before we sort of break out into Q&A. What I wanted to just do quite quickly was just sort of circulate through the groups. We're probably not have time to get sort of insight from every person, but can we just go through this sort of facilitators from idea drop and just give a quick sort of snapshot of what your business goal was, and any interesting sort of 60, 90-second soundbite around what happened. We're going to share all these sheets as well afterwards, so we'll sort of share that insight, but it'd be good to just get that update. Let's kick off with Ali. Did you run a session?
Yes, I did. I was just muted. I did. I think it's in one of the next slides. I think it'll be on yours. Not this one.
That one.
That's the one. The one above with the dashes. One before this one.
The one before, perfect.
This is the one. Okay. So yeah, obviously we had a big goal there, a big high level profit. So I think it was a good exercise in learning how to chop a big business goal down into smaller chunks by recognizing what the barriers are. So we kind of thought, obviously, a hypothetical situation. Some of the audience kind enough suggest these three things. So having a reactionary approach to goals, and essentially firefighting, doing a lot of reacting to things rather than carrying out a strategy. And then the complexity or the effect of changing price. Obviously, certain things might be locked in contracts. How do you, if, for example, you don't sell many units, if you're, say, I don't know, whatever. I don't necessarily need an example there, but essentially, the complexity changing price, variability, unpredictability of costs. So obviously, that stuff like how well do you know your suppliers, how well do you know other suppliers, how good are your relations with them, how do you calculate their costs, how do you keep track of them, how do you therefore predict them, and so really recognizing that those two things are actually linked. If you're maybe unable to shift pricing, then maybe you do more firefighting, because that's more of a rigid thing, so you have to actually do more things on the cost side. But at the same time, if costs are unpredictable, then you have your own problem there, where maybe you overspend on certain projects, or you underspend on certain important projects, like Bill Gates's Kindle, for example, because and it's a good example of him maybe not appreciating or overestimating the cost compared to the benefit of that. But anyway, it's kind of appreciating that those two things are linked. If you're, so for example, more able to work out your costs, you might be more able to therefore have a less reactionary, more process-driven strategy. And then obviously, am I going too long? How is it just an overview?
It's just an overview, but we'll give you one. We'll give you one final point. I mean, it's not a full
right.
topic, isn't it?
Okay.
Profit by 5%. But yeah. What's your final outcome? Have you solved the problem, or do we need to do a little bit more work?
Well, we're gonna it's a cost thing. So we're going to map out the costs. We're going to see if we're going to do health checks on our supplier relations, and we're going to see if if there are any kind of inconsistencies with what we expect and what we see, and then off the back of that, we'll be able to make a more cost-based strategy that we'll be able to check each budget year, and that will be the time frame in which we'll do it in.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ali. And by the way, just as a little disclaimer, that doesn't include idea drop, because we are the people that facilitate innovation, so you shouldn't look at us as a cost at all. We are a benefit in kind. Thank you, Ali. I will pass to Nick. We had a really, really interesting conversation. I was part of this, but I'll pass over to Nick to summarize it.
Yes, so we established, again, we had some really interesting sort of insights and suggestions from those in the group. Thank you so much for your open and dialogic commitment to solving one of the biggest questions on people's minds at the moment, which is how can we return to the office in a way that learns from the lessons of the past 12 months and builds a working experience suited to the future. Rather than sort of a pathway to achieving this, and this is one of the great things about setting goals and the structure and direction it can give thoughts around a certain topic. It prompted us to ask really interesting questions. How do we work when people are in the office? How much of the workspace, how much of the workforce do we expect to be in the office? What type of health and safety precautions do we have to institute? But also the more sort of operational and logistical aspects to that process of moving back in after so long away. But also sort of it came down to both timelines and impact, not only sort of in terms of quantifiable monetary savings that might go with not returning to the office and not having to pay the rent, but what impact and opportunity loss do we potentially sort of sacrifice by sort of running the business on Zoom or running the business virtually as sort of as the modus operandi. And within that, we unpick sort of both the tangible benefits of shorter term savings versus the more intangible benefits of the longer term losses potentially, or the longer term benefits of being in the office or being out of the office. And in truth, I don't actually think that we sort of built a pathway to the answer to this goal, but it provided us with a really good foundation of insights and ideas and questions and stakeholders to approach and explore. But I think the bottom line is it's an incredibly difficult goal to achieve and an incredibly difficult question to get a single answer for, with many different views and many different value statements and value opportunities that are both intangible and tangible and longer term and shorter term that go with this. And it was great to hear from everyone again in what is a topic that I'm sure everyone's sort of mulling over and considering at the moment. So thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Yeah, it was a very good, very different view. So it was a really, really interesting conversation, and one I think we'll probably continue with, because I think it's going to be one that will be with us for a while. And there's not a right and a wrong answer to many of these things, but will be different approaches. And our final group was around how do we become more customer-centric, I believe, or was it? I apologise. Who was the final group, and have I got the right sheet?
Yeah, this is our group. So yes, it was how do we become a more customer-centric organization, and there's so many different angles you can view it through. And I think we are definitely guilty of having me talk too much and running out of time at the end. But I just want to touch on a few things we were talking about. And the first piece was the what does good look like, and your customers are going to have different views depending on different industries and different stages in their growth, their life cycles. So to first understand where you want to go, to use that analogy of the mountain, to understand where the top is, you've got to understand where the bottom is. And so that's something we were talking about, was how to define success. And in fact, if you don't have that definition, you can't draw the mountain out, to keep hammering that analogy home, then you don't know what route to take up it. And so that's something we were touching upon. Something else we were touching upon was the need to iterate quickly. And I think one of the members from room 3 was talking about the need to build minimum viable or minimum valuable products off these ideation programs to to work out if they're going to fail and if they're going to succeed. And if they're going to fail, let them fail quickly and move on to the next one. And so we were talking about timeframes. Timeframes in terms of that process that Paul was mentioning earlier, from ideation to implementation. And we're also talking about timeframes for innovation goals. And they're going to be two different things, because you might implement an idea within 6 weeks. You might see it's a really good one, understand you've got the capacity to do it, put it in place, but you might not see the returns from that idea in 6 to 12 months. So it's about understanding the different stages within your ideation program and when you're expecting to get those returns. And so if it's a longer time frame until it's going to get return, you need to be aware of that when it gets put into place. And the last thing I want to touch upon was someone made a very good point to do with if you're reaching out to customers, you still got to understand your organization. And so having different stakeholders involved internally and externally as part of that process is really, really important. So thinking about holistically about the organization, even if you're trying to improve your customer experience, there's going to be an effect internally as well. So I think that's the main things we were touching on.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sam. Another little small question. We probably they're big, broad topics, but quite hard to sort of facilitate down. So thank you, everyone, for participating in the groups. The groups that I were part of were incredibly interesting and lots of diversity of thought, which I thank you all for contributing. And we'll share those documents with you as well. I'm going to talk about how we do it a little bit more broadly and holistically throughout the rest of the presentation and connect people. So broadcasting innovation challenges. Now, the good thing is coming up with the challenges as we're starting to see are the challenges aren't necessarily difficult, but actually how do we structure and get the right information is a critical part. But firstly, how do we broadcast it? No issue, no problem, no point in having these things unless we can find a way to communicate. So that is really, really important, as you would expect. So using your internal communication channels and your external communication channels, if this is going to be broadcast to a wider network of people or ecosystem. So we need a really clear challenge, we need a really clear ask, and we need a way to create a feedback mechanism for those things. So how do we keep people informed of what's happening? Because that's why people will continue to contribute when they feel part of something. If it's a one-way flow of information, that's more difficult. So we're talking about sharing challenges, your internet, your emails, websites, presentations, social media. And for me, it's about sort of consolidating how many of those they are and thinking about the important things that you want to do in a sequential manner. So rather than just going out and going, here are all the things that we're trying to solve, it becomes a little bit overwhelming. So structuring that process and releasing questions allows you to alter what you release in the future. It's not a linear, innovation is not a linear path in the sense that we'll go a straight line, we will weave and we will move around. By doing it in a kind of an iterative process that allows us to develop as we go. Offer reward and recognition to consider ideation. I mean, that's our to encourage ideation. No huge surprises there. I'm sure you've all heard me say this, those who have spoken in the past. Recognition, interestingly, is still a bigger reward, or sorry, a bigger motivation than reward is. People are really, really, really passionate about having their voice heard, people listening and deciding to do something with it. Not every idea is a good idea, we all know that. In fact, it's quite a small percentage of things that will ever be able to be implemented because of the resources that we have as an organization. But by listening and by responding and by communicating back, people become very encouraged and enthused. And innovation is a change management agent as well, and it changes over time, and organizations with their cultural nuances that exist within them will also develop as that journey goes. My reward is still, of course, is still a driver, but it's trying to find the combination of both. But equally, it's about finding the combination and finding what's rewarding for some people and not others is really important. So we're not all the same. We need to be able to put people into groups to make it manageable, but we shouldn't have a blanket process. I'm going to sort of skip over the slide fairly quickly because it looks very detailed. So how do we actually structure a challenge? And we're going to sort of share this with you as a document. We have challenge writing guides. We do challenge interviews with our clients as well. From an organizational perspective, where we know that we get these right, and then innovation can flow quite quickly thereafter and actually show impact. So we're just going to share this document rather than we necessarily go through it in the interest of time, but it's just a guide and a framework that you can use. So in terms of call to action, the innovation framework card we're going to send you, if you wanted to fill it in, as part of what we will do as an organization is give a challenge co-authoring session. This isn't about technology. So even if you're not a customer of Idea Drop and you're interested in speaking to one of our innovation consultants on running some of these challenge sessions, which is how do we sort of create these problem statements and these challenges that we can then broadcast out. It's obviously there, the first 5 attendees to fill in with their challenge framework card, which we'll send you, I believe. We'll run that session. So it'll help showcase a bit of the benefits that we can bring as a business outside of tech, but also allow you to generate some ideas. And technology, like I said at the start, is a facilitation. It's not the only part of this process. So even if we can start with asking the right question, then we can move forward. We'll also share our LinkedIn group. So I mentioned before that we want to create we have a network of people, of course, but we want to expand upon it. So whenever we run these events, we'll invite you to our LinkedIn group. It gives you an opportunity to connect to the people that were on this call, and also to chat. I think innovation is about sharing best practice. We're industry agnostic as a supplier, so we see innovation from retail to law to FMCG to police to NHS. Really interesting organization doing it in different ways. I would encourage you to talk to different people that are doing it and find out what challenges they see and how they overcome them. And actually learning from other industries allows us to be better in our own rather than necessarily just looking at what our competitors do. So I'll encourage everyone to do that, and we'll connect that afterwards. And then the final point is we're going to share as well. We're running a number of public challenges, so we allow our customers through our platform. But we're actually really interested in asking some of the questions that we talked about today, but pushing that out to our network. So people that are on these calls, but also your network. So it's a shareable asset. What we want to be able to do is to collect lots of ideas around some of these broader problem statements or challenges that exist in society. And what we're going to do as an organization is collate those and push them back out of the report. So if you do contribute or you share it and anybody that contributes will get a copy of the report, which is here are the ideas that we generated around that particular challenge. But we'll do a consolidated view. So we'll say, well, these are the ideas that are most popular. So therefore, this is the most favored or crowd collaborated solution or idea against solving this problem. So please do share it with other people and get involved. It's completely open. And we're just really interested to see if we can come up with some really good ideas and share that best practice. So thank everyone, and thank you to Paul Sloane for speaking today. Thank you to everyone at Idea Drop that should help facilitate and run the sessions, and of course Indra and Anastasia for setting it up and running it. And thank you everyone for attending. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got some value. We have 5 more in our series that will be run. But equally, as we follow up, give feedback. If things you liked, great. Things you didn't like, we want to hear that too, because we want to improve these sessions. We need to be prepared to fail and get feedback and improve as well. So treat us in the way that we sort of see innovation. And we'll send you all the resources and look forward to hearing from you. But thank you very much, everyone.